I was expecting a lot from this game. Not only is it a Zelda game, it's a Breath of the Wild prequel, and both Zelda and Breath of the Wild are synonymous with quality. Even though this is a Musou spinoff, I was still expecting quite a bit in terms of this game's quality. And I gotta say, my expectations have been met. And before we get into the review proper, this is a spoiler-free review. I will touch on the story and what I thought about it, but I'm not going to go into the minutia of the plot and go over very specific plot points because I want everyone to enjoy this game as fresh as possible. And another thing, if you are a Breath of the Wild fan, you need to play this game. Even if you are hesitant because of the Musou style, this should be your first Musou game that you ever try, because this game makes Breath of the Wild better. And if you think you know everything already, based off of playing Breath of the Wild and hearing about what happened 100 years ago, if you think this game just, fleshes things out a little bit of, events you already know, you're wrong. There's much more to this game than that, but I can't go into specifics. But suffice to say, if you're a Breath of the Wild fan, you need to play this game. It is must-play material. And I can say with a certain degree of confidence that you won't regret it. In terms of this game's graphics, there's really not a lot to say except for the fact that it's more Breath of the Wild. One of the best looking games ever made and one of the best art directions ever in a game as well. So, it's just more of an absolutely good thing. The character art in this game is still fantastic, and it gave me more of something that was lacking in Breath of the Wild proper, and that was just cutscenes. I loved the cutscenes that we did get in Breath of the Wild because the characters just look so good. And in this game, we get to see, a whole bunch more cutscenes with all of these beloved Zelda characters, especially the champions that, we got to see little snippets of in the original game and hear about how awesome they were. We actually get to see them in cutscenes kicking ass, and it was so satisfying and it was so fun to watch. One thing I did notice though that was to the game's detriment was some of the asset loading. There's so many characters on screen, whether it's enemy troops or allied troops and your characters themselves. There's a lot being demanded of the Switch with this game. So when you're running around the world, I would notice, rocks and trees and, maybe grass or whatever would be popping up like as I'm right on top of it. And, as jarring as that could be sometimes, it was very fleeting because usually there's so much going on gameplay wise, like hundreds of enemies to slay around you at any given time that, I would, quickly get back into the gameplay. So, it is noticeable, but it doesn't really take away from the game in any meaningful way. And speaking of troops on screen, it was awesome seeing Ganon's hordes fighting against the kingdom of Hyrule in all its glory, and just seeing all these troops going at it on the field, and you as the player knowing, especially if you play Breath of the Wild, what is at stake, because you know what is in store for this kingdom 100 years later if you fail. And it just gave you that added sense of momentum, and just that, it just felt damn right glorious almost when you're on the field with all these troops and you're just fighting as hard as you can to make sure the kingdom doesn't fall. I was just so impressed with the amount of troops on screen at any given time, and just everyone just wailing at each other. And in terms of gameplay, there's no dicking around with this game. You are thrust into combat immediately, and it is very fun. Every character feels wholly unique in combat. Every character has very specific, unique abilities only they can use, and every character's combos are fairly straightforward and easy to figure out. But the fun lies in knowing which combos to use at which given moment, because all these combos have various different areas of effects, or lengths, or activation times. So that is where the fun comes into play, not so much as pulling off really difficult combos, but just knowing when to use them in the appropriate places. And one of my gripes with Breath of the Wild proper was, we are introduced to these cool characters that are dead, right? And I always felt like, I just wish these characters could get their due, and I wish we could see them in all their glory and see how truly badass they are. And that's what this game does. It lets us see the champions kick ass in this game. And all of the characters in this game have, various special attacks or, kind of like finishing moves as well. And it just shows everybody in all their glory. And it's great to see a character besides Link kick ass for once. And something I had completely forgotten about when previewing the game and watching trailers for it were the Divine Beast battles. The Divine Beasts are back. These were ancient weapons of mass destruction, essentially, that are used to fight Ganon. And we actually get to pilot them in this game. And they were actually, fun little distractions from the main Musou gameplay. Essentially, you're in these big robots and you're laying waste to thousands of enemies at once. While it was fun gameplay, it was a bit clunky at times too, depending on which Divine Beast you were piloting. But these sequences were generally so short and so infrequent that when you did play them, it would just be enough to kind of like spice up the gameplay a little bit for a little while. And then you go back to, the classic Musou gameplay. So, while it was a little clunky at times, it was still fun. The Breath of the Wild map is back as well in this game, and this time it's full of icons to fill out or complete, either by fighting battles or by providing material resources. And generally by being a bit of a completionist as I progress through the game, doing everything I can as I'm going, I could fill out the map with relative ease. So it was very much just me going through the map, like filling out little spots, and I get a lot out of that as a completionist. And I didn't find that to be particularly tedious. With a lot of games, especially open world games, completing a big map can be a really tedious endeavor, but it wasn't in this game. I found it really enjoyable, and there was very little backtracking, at least for me personally, in terms of getting the proper resources to fill out the map appropriately. So it was once again something nice for the game in terms of gameplay, and I think it should be a bit of a case study almost for how to make a map fun to complete. And even though this is a Musou game, it still has a lot of Breath of the Wild tendencies. For example, in the main campaign maps, you are rewarded for exploring, very much like Breath of the Wild itself. You are rewarded for going out of your way and checking every nook and cranny. And very much so in this game, you're rewarded either with treasure chests or by finding, once again, Korok seeds, which can be used to fulfill certain side quests to gain, certain new abilities or items or new weapon slots. And speaking of exploration, I lost count of the amount of times I would just stop and look around in this game and just remember scenes from Breath of the Wild. There's so much territory in this game that we're in where it's like, oh man, I remember this part of the game, and this city was nothing but a pile of rubble, or this temple was nothing but ruins, or this village literally doesn't even exist in Breath of the Wild. And when you're fighting in this game, it just makes you want to save the kingdom that much more, because you know what's in store for it if you fail. When you're fighting street to street, house to house, and you and all of your myriad amount of troops are just fighting as hard as you fucking can to save this kingdom. Oh, it just made me fall in love with this game. Just knowing if you and your companions fail, this kingdom is fucked. Just even talking about it, like the back of my head is like starting to tingle, and I'm starting to get almost goosebumps thinking about it, because it just made the game so goddamn exhilarating. Having loved Breath of the Wild so much and just being, so devastated by obviously the events that happened 100 years ago, I was, I found it incredibly sad, that Link and Zelda and all their companions failed and the kingdom suffered dearly for it. And now we're in this moment of time and we know what's on the horizon if we fail. And it just made me fight that much harder at specific points of the game, because I'm like, well, we don't do our job here. This city, this town, this temple, it's all going to be totally fucking trashed. And man, it made me love this game for making me feel that way. If they ever make another Zelda Musou game of this type, blending in actual Zelda lore with the Musou gameplay, and there's all these great wars that have happened in Zelda lore that we don't really know anything about. If they go back and visit these, these various epochs and do games of this type for it, immediate buy from me. Now for the game's story. I would love to talk about it more and go into in-depth detail about it, but I won't for this video. But suffice to say, I was incredibly invested in this game's story. And because I was so invested in it, it fixed the one thing that has always been missing for me when it comes to Musou games. And that is a good story. And apparently it's exactly what I needed, because the story in this game made this the best Musou or Warriors game I've ever played. And I already touched on how I really enjoyed the cutscenes in this game and how they looked great, but another nice thing that they added to this game was a theater mode. So you can go back and look at any of these cutscenes at any time you want. In case you maybe, were half paying attention for one scene or whatever, you can just go back and get those story beats that you maybe missed. And as I've already said, this game fleshes out the champions quite a bit and they get their moment in the spotlight, which is very much what I wanted for them. I always felt like they deserved more time in it. And a lot of the champions and characters in this game get, very touching moments and very character pleasing moments. And the story as a whole took a direction I did not anticipate it going, which is actually foolish on my part because it is very much a direction or a theme that Zelda games have flirted quite a bit with in the past, and they do so again in this one, but I won't say what it is. If I ever get time to in the future, to go through Breath of the Wild again, the game will have taken on a new set of meaning for me. The weight of the tragedy that occurred 100 years ago has been amplified greatly, and it will make me even more invested in saving the Hyrule of Breath of the Wild because I have greater nuance and understanding of what's been lost in terms of a people scattered and friends killed. This game deepens the tragedy of Breath of the Wild leaps and bounds, and that is a success. And in terms of Zelda music, they did a fantastic job. They always do. There were more than one or two moments where I would stop and just listen to the music and I would just get goosebumps on my arms because it's Zelda music. It's always great. And there's a lot of the classic tunes there that, that dredge up all the good memories as well, right? And in terms of spoken dialogue, I only went through this game with the Japanese voice actors because as soon as I got the opportunity to with Breath of the Wild, I immediately switched to the Japanese voice actors because I just thought they did a much better job. So I just started this game with the Japanese voice actors right away. And I didn't even sample the English voice actors. I should have, for review's sake, I should have tested it out. But I just knew I would enjoy the Japanese voice actors. So that's just what I picked and that's just what I stuck with. And they did a great freaking job. So in conclusion, this game does an excellent job blending Breath of the Wild's gameplay and mechanics with the Musou style. It is by far the best Musou style game I've ever played. I've played some fun Musou games, but the fact that this game has an awesome story with awesome characters that a lot of us Zelda fans wanted more time with makes it freaking amazing. And the music is excellent like you would expect of any Zelda game. And the fact that the game is identical looking to Breath of the Wild just makes you feel like you're coming home in terms of playing a Zelda game again. It just immediately fills you with that sense of warmth and belonging. And that's why this game is an absolute must play for any Zelda fan out there. Thank you for joining me for this Game Break review, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and play this game if you're a Zelda fan. You owe it to yourself to enjoy this game. Take it easy.